Hi, my name is Cindy Rang with the Fabric Patch in Ephrata, Washington. You can find us at fabricpatch.net. And I'm going to talk to you today about scissors. Everything you need to know. Okay, so lots of questions about scissors. People will always ask, what kind should I have? Is this one better than this one? What is this other one used for? And why do I need these scissors? So the first thing that I want to mention is that this is not a sponsored video. No one is paying me to say anything about any brand. I'm going to say exactly which ones I use, which ones I like, but the truth is there's lots of different brands out there. There are some that are more expensive than others. Typically what happens is there's a reason for that, and maybe I can kind of try to explain what the difference is between the very cheap scissors and the very expensive scissors. So first let's just talk about basic scissors. I think that it is important if you are a quilter or a seamstress, first of all, to have about a 5 to 6 inch pair of scissors. What happens when you have a shorter blade is you have a little bit more control. So if you are cutting something, cutting out an applique, cutting out some sort of a decorative thing, what'll happen is you're actually cutting up here so that when you start to cut, maybe I can demonstrate here a little bit, you will cut up here, and then as you're turning, you're going to go ahead and make that cut all the way down so you can make a fairly large cut. And so 5 to 6 inches is just about the right size for doing smaller projects. This is a fairly basic pair of scissors that you'd probably pay somewhere around $7 to $8 for. You can get a little bit more expensive pair. These are actually my favorites. These are Havel's, and what they have is they have two differences to them. One is this serrated blade. I don't know if you're really able to see it very well, but there's tiny little teeth on this, and you can feel it if you run your hand across. The other thing is that it has this little titanium coating. So when it's time for me to cut, I can make that same cut, but what will happen is the scissors are actually gripping so that there isn't any sliding going on. So as I'm cutting, I have slightly more control when I'm cutting something. So that's what's so nice about those serrations right there. This one happens to be one of the smaller 5.5 inch blades. They also make them in a 6.5 and a 7 inch. I love these. I do have them in every size. They tend to be pretty much my go-to scissor, just because it's funny that that tiny little serration makes such a difference, but it's just that idea of gripping it while you're cutting, and then there's no slipping that's going on. If you're cutting wool, it really does make a humongous difference. This one is extremely similar. This one is made by Karen K. Buckley. What's different though is that if you have thumb arthritis or you have a little bit of maybe some dexterity issues, this is just a wider grip, and so people will find that if they have some swelling in their hands, this just fits them better. But I would say from here down, it's basically the same idea. It's just you can see there's a pretty huge difference in terms of the grip and how you're able to hold on to it. So this is probably my favorite scissor and what I grab most often, but I also have a larger scissor. Gingers are expensive scissors. Everybody knows that, but Gingers are super nice. If you are serious about sewing, quilting, cutting, it is kind of nice to have a pair of scissors that can do a huge job. So these will cut through all sorts of layers. They cut consistently. They're easy to resharpen. So this is an 8.5 inch blade, and that's the big deal, is that I can take this to a knife sharpener, a scissor sharpener, and they can resharpen these as many times as they need to, and they will look great each time. If something really terrible happens and these get left outside or buried or something weird and they end up getting really rusty, you can clean these all up because of what they're made out of. So they are kind of nice. They're meant to last a lifetime. They stay sharp. They don't splay out. You can get less expensive large scissors, but what will happen is if it doesn't have that nice stainless steel screw and nut, then what'll happen is as you're cutting, if you're cutting through thick things, it'll actually end up bowing those blades apart so that it never gets that nice crisp cut again. The other thing is some of them you really can't sharpen them because they're not made out of durable enough steel. So that's what the difference is. You can also find some that are a little bit middle of the road. Fiskars makes a good one. They make some large ones. Same idea. You can sharpen these. They're pretty large scissors. They're about half the price. They have a nice comfort grip. They'll work well. They'll last for years and years and years. And you can even get them a little bit smaller. They also, Gingers makes classic ones every year where they put kind of a really cool design on them. They're even more expensive. There's another brand, this guy, it's about half the price. And so they are kind of doing sort of the same thing. It's not, it's pretty similar quality. It is a stainless steel scissor. It is an 8-inch scissor, but a little bit decorative and probably $30 less than Gingers. So a couple of options, but you do need a large pair of scissors when you're cutting through batting, quilts, trimming up quilts to be able to put binding on. You can use a rotary cutter, but a lot of it depends on the thickness that you have with your rotary cutter blade. And also, sometimes when you're cutting through 3 or 4 layers, and one of those layers being batting, you don't always know if you've made it all the way through until you're done. And this way with scissors, you know instantly that you've made that cut and you're able to keep going. So I do use my large 8.5-inch blades often as well. Another pair of scissors that I use all the time are my little embroidery scissors. I do tend to spend some money on my scissors, but my embroidery scissors, not so much, just because, you know, all I'm really cutting with these typically is thread. So pretty much even the $3 pair of scissors are going to be great. I might want to put a little sheath on them so that I don't poke anything, but they just need to have a nice sharp tip. You can you'd be able to not only cut through that thread, but if you have just a little bit of cotton you need to cut, it's not going to cut through very much because they're tiny little blades, but they work pretty well. If you want something middle of the road in between your tiny little embroidery scissors and your 5-inch scissors, there is a 3.5-inch blade. I pick this up a lot. I also keep this with my hand embroidery stuff because if I do have a little bit of fabric that I'm cutting at the same time, it'll cut through both fabric and thread, and I can resharpen them because I've purchased a better quality scissor. For just a moment, let's talk about care of your scissors. It is nice to be able to take them in and get them sharpened when you need to. I usually try to do it every spring. Take in your yard tools, get those sharpened, get your scissors sharpened, and it just works out fantastic when you have a nice new sharp blade. The other thing though is that if you cut with paper, people know that paper will dull scissors, but it's not really the act of cutting through the paper that dulls the scissors. It's the paper, the wood pulp residue that's left on your blade. That's what's causing the problem. So if you end up cutting through paper, and even with sewing and quilting, you're going to cut through paper occasionally with your good scissors. If you're paper piecing, if you've got freezer paper on there, if you're doing applique, there's going to be paper and sometimes maybe even some sticky residue from your fusible web. So when that happens, the best thing to do is a piece of wool. If you don't have a piece of wool in your stash, when you place an order with us, just put in the notes that we should ask us to just throw in a piece of wool for you. We're more than happy to do that. All you do is you just take your little bit of wool, and when it comes time to clean your scissors, all you need to do is just rub along the side like that, and what happens is the wool, and I guess the lanolin in the wool, will clean off any of the fusible applique residue. It'll also clean off any of that wood pulp residue from cutting on paper. And that's all you'd need to do to be able to keep your scissors sharp until you get them sharpened, and make sure that they stay sharp once you have gotten them sharpened. So let's talk a little bit about some of the specialty scissors. So first I want to talk about pinking blades. So pinking blades, they can be kind of expensive. So the scissors, I think I've paid maybe $40 for these quite a few years ago. I think this pair is actually titanium coated. These are 19 bucks. So not terrible, but I don't feel like I use my pinking blades as much as I used to. People will ask about pinking blades and ask if that's what they should cut their fabric with, and why do all of the pre-cuts come with a pinked edge? The reason for that is because it diminishes fraying. Because of course, when you think about your fabric and you've got your weft and your warp threads, when you cut along one side, you could have just that trailing thread that'll just kind of keep peeling off. But if you've done a pinked edge, you won't have all of that fraying. Normally we cut it, we're not super rough with our fabric, so it's probably not going to fray so much anyway, but that's why they do this, because these pieces, the little pre-cuts that they've cut and sent to us, they sometimes are rolling around in a shop for a while. When we ship them to you, different things will happen, so they don't want them to look all tattered and frayed on the edges. So that's why they pink them, is just to keep them looking kind of nice for you. It's not that you have to pink everything that you're doing. If you like a pinked edge, sometimes I'll do it for decorative reasons or for raggedy things or with wool. The other option that you have is a pinked blade. If you have an extra rotary cutter hanging around, or even just to take your regular straight blade out and put your pinked blade in, then you could have a pinking one. And this one is the one that I just keep now. I don't use this rotary cutter anymore. I have my other one that I use all the time, so I've permanently put my pinked blade in here. And the pinked blade is about 25% the cost of pinking shears. So that's the other reason to do it, is it's just a little bit more affordable. The other types of specialty scissors that are kind of nice to have, a lot of it with specialty scissors is it depends on how often you're going to use it. So if you like raggedy projects, raggedy quilts, the raggedy rug, things where you have a lot of those sorts of edges, this is one of those spring action scissors. So you can see that when I push down, but it automatically just lifts up on its own. So what's nice about that is that the tension on my hand and on my thumb is just 50%. So I'm only doing half the work because the rest of it is being done for me. And I really like the large ones just because these are going to cut through anything. The blade is fairly small, but it works really well every time. These are the micro tip ones. So these also nice. They work the same way, where half the work is done for you, but they have a little bit sharper point. So if you're cutting into something kind of finite and tiny, they work just a little bit different. So both of them work really well. You might see these called rag snips in other places. Another specialty tool, and you're going to have to zoom way in to see this one. These scissors are called snip-a-stitch, and if you see this, that little tooth on there, if you are ripping something out, I'm going to grab this for just a second, all you have to do is just hook up underneath your stitch, and then you can just snip it. And so it's really easy if you have just a couple of stitches you want to tear out, or you want to do something a little bit different, different from a seam ripper. So it's kind of cool. I pick it up every once in a while when I have something very specific I want to snip. And another one that's kind of a specialty thing is a duck-billed scissors. So they come in a couple different sizes. There's a smaller one and a larger one. These are used primarily for people that are doing machine embroidery or hand embroidery. So if you can imagine that this is on somebody's hoop, and it's hooped and on their machine, and they have to do some trimming. If you get in there with a regular pair of scissors, sometimes you can poke something and really not know what's happening underneath where you're trimming. But with duck-billed scissors, what happens is you can slide underneath there and you can get extremely close to what you're trimming. You can see that I can get right up next to there, because oftentimes on machine embroidery, you're going to trim all of that fabric off, and then you're going to zigzag over the top of it. So that's what the duck-billed scissors are for, is that you can get super close. I could even get closer, I think, if I had my glasses on. And you're not going to hit anything else, and you're not going to poke the fabric underneath. So machine embroiderer, they have to have a pair of these. Super, super important. I think the last thing I just want to mention is that when I was talking about the care of scissors and how to clean them, again, a piece of wool is good. But the other thing is if you have a quality pair of scissors that you are maintaining, the other thing that you can do is you can just put a little drop of oil. And we use our machine oil. We just open them up, and right here where the little screw and the nut is, just put a little drop of oil, and I put it right on the inside there. Run it just a couple times, and if you have that little squeak, can you hear it? Just put a little drop of oil there, and that'll go away, and it'll just help to extend the life of your scissors. One thing though is Gingers, they do have a lifetime warranty. So again, that's part of what you're paying for. The last thing is that you should always mark your scissors, and there's lots of ways to do it. There are little things, little scissor fobs, and there's things that they kind of hang off of your scissor. I have to say that for me personally, I don't like that because I always feel like I get it in the way, it's banging on something, and oftentimes they're a little bit long. So I tend to not be a fan of that, but what you can do, you can use a Sharpie marker and write on the handle. You can go ahead and write your name. I do that a lot. I'll just write my last name. You can also tie something that's a little bit shorter so that you know from across the room that those are your scissors, because if you're going to a class or to a retreat, typically everybody's going to have the same tools that you have. The other option is just to take some fingernail polish. Fingernail polish is great because you can put just a little flower on there, you can put an initial, you can put a couple little cute dots. It actually gets kind of decorative, and if you decide that you hate the color or what you did, you can take it off and it's no big deal. So fingernail polish is another reasonable option for you to be able to know that it's your pair of scissors and that you don't have to question it at the end of a class. All right, I think that's kind of the basics. Everybody should have about a 5.5 or a 6-inch blade. Everybody should have an 8.5-inch dressmaker shears. And I think that everybody should have small little thread snips that work really well. But there are lots of other options for specialty scissors depending upon the projects that you're doing. So there's always a great tool for whatever job you're doing. I hope that this was helpful. If you need any help in the future finding that perfect pair of scissors, be sure and check us out. Again, it's at fabricpatch.net. Thank you for watching our video. We invite you to leave a comment, hit the like button, or better yet, subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode. You can also visit our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or Pinterest pages, or find all of those things and our online store at fabricpatch.net.